and welcome to episode 11 of Gar Borras' Time Machine. Today, Gar, we're going to be talking about the 90th anniversary of the 1931 film Frankenstein. And of course, it's going to take us back to the very first episode because in that episode we talked about 90 years of Dracula, and these films were kind of really what launched the Universal monster movie series, and these two films, and it's kind of odd they both are sharing that 90th anniversary. But let's get into it. I mean, are you much of a Frankenstein fan, or even just a horror fan at all?
Big time. Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, all of that stuff from that time period, the black and white, early 1900s.
And it's these films that really helped to launch, Universal as a major movie studio.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere that Universal was actually in trouble financially. They had lost an outrageous amount of money for that time period. By today's time, standards, we look at those numbers and we go, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
But back in those days, those numbers were outrageous numbers, going in the negative, which is not a good thing. But then when the Dracula movie came out, it was such a success that it actually turned Universal into a $700,000 profit, which was astronomical at that time. yeah,
and what's interesting about what you just got done saying is, now when they originally released the first Dracula film back in 1931, and they saw the success they had with that, they could have thought, okay, right away we got to do Dracula 2, and they eventually made more Dracula movies, of course, but instead of kind of going that route, let's say, okay, there's something to this horror movie thing, let's see if we can even create what else we can create out of this, and kind of, I mean, that is really where the horror movie franchise really began with Universal in these films.
Absolutely, and you're right about that. It wasn't just let's make another Dracula. It was, hey, let's explore the horror movie as a thing.
Yeah.
And which became those explosions of all these different iconic characters by today's standards. They're the originals. The Frankensteins, the Draculas, the Wolfman. Let me see, the Invisible Man.
Yeah,
there's just so many of those types of movies that came out during that time, and when I was a kid, I was totally into black and white movies. If it was a black and white movie, I wanted to see it.
Yeah.
Whether it was good or bad or what, I just liked the way that they used to dress. Back in those days, and the way that they used to talk in those movies. If you notice how the dialogue is actually spoken by the actors, there's kind of a style of a dialogue. How I would imagine, I don't know for sure, I would imagine that it's rooted in stage productions, and plays and things like that, how people used to talk in...
Well, you got to remember, before Dracula or even Frankenstein or any of this stuff was ever even a movie, I mean, before they even had movies at all, I mean, they were originally books, of course. They were originally, eventually, before there was ever movies, they had play adaptations of these things. I mean, the film we're talking about came out in 1931, and it's based on the book, of course, that came out, if you can believe it, all the way back in 1818, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley.
That.
You ever hear Mary Shelley's Frankenstein? That's what the movies are all based on, her original novel. But just think about that. So the novel of this story originated in 1818, and it's not until 1931 till the first Frankenstein movie comes out.
Yeah, but I think it was 1824, her version, the original version of Frankenstein, was actually made into a stage production.
That's what I'm saying, like a play, and I think they've even...
That's not too long after the book was actually released. And the whole idea behind her writing Frankenstein started as a kind of like a bet, kind of competition thing between her and somebody else. They were, they were on a vacation, but the weather turned out to be horrible on the vacation, so they wound up having to stay indoors. And to kind of kill time, they came up with this competition of who could come up with the best horror story. That's how Frankenstein was born. She was stuck in this house, and and there were after they had decided to they agreed to do the bet. She went a few days, maybe even up to about a week, before she actually came up with the idea of Frankenstein as the premise.
And we got to also consider the fact that these films that came out in 1931, 1931, that's just a few years before, that's when they started really even having sound in movies. I mean, before that, that's was really the silent age of movies, when you just had people acting on the screen and you couldn't really even hear what the people were saying. You had to kind of figure out what the story even was, or they have writing maybe even on the like subtitles on the screen, so you kind of figure out what was being said. So when you go back to Frankenstein and you talk about the way they talked, I mean, these people are kind of learning how to make a movie as they're doing it, and these are one of the first kind of films that they have talking in. So, movie making was not as advanced as what it is today. Even the special effects were very, very light for its time. But there's a lot more special effects that you could work with these days. They could colorize everything. But I do think the black and white, for the time period of when these films were made, it gives it a little bit of authenticity, because this is their very first Frankenstein film. All the other films that came after, you kind of this amazingly holds up all these years, 90 years later.
Well, yeah, the black and white just naturally gives it a gothic feel. And, to the whole thing. To colorize it, I think it would
take something away,
affect it negatively. It just needs to still stay as a black and white.
Oh, I totally agree. And just to give people kind of again a time frame of when we're talking here, the film was originally released November 21st, 1931. So that's where we're going back in the time machine today to November of 1931, November 21st to be exact. It was as far as the length of the film, it's 71 minutes, and the box office that you were talking about originally made $12 million off the when it was initially released. So, and of course Boris Karloff was the star of this, and just a little interesting facts there.
Well, Boris is one of the horror movie royalty.
Oh yeah, I mean him, along with Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney Jr., Boris Karloff. Now, here's the thing, okay? He was born November 23rd, 1887. His birth name was William Henry Pratt. He became known by his stage name of Boris Karloff, and was an English actor. He starred as Frankenstein monster in the 1931 film Frankenstein, which made him a horror movie icon, as you were just saying.
Yeah. It's just, you can watch virtually any movie that he made from that time period, and they're all worth seeing.
And I understand he became, like you said, such a horror icon. I mean, that he was kind of typecast in that when he did go and try to do other types of movies, that's what people kind of point to as the horror films, and that's what he's remembered for.
Well, during that time,
Yeah.
you know, that was a commonplace thing that happened to actors and actresses, mostly, you know, the male actors. If you became, you know, super famous from a particular character you play, it's hard to separate yourself from that character when you want to do other movies. But also the electric scene where they're actually bringing life to the
monster,
to the monster, you know, that they refer it to. You know, that is also a very first time ever for creating that
type of special effect.
Of a scene,
yeah, and that was a real.
That is even just that backdrop and that whole electric is iconic.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, just the weird, you know, sparks coming. I was reading somewhere where they actually infused the Tesla coil as part of electrical background to that, which you know, is, you know, just kind of giving you know, some more validity to Tesla, because he's one of those forgotten
geniuses.
Forgotten geniuses that just kind of, you know, because he you know, he was so giving in his you know, accomplishments that he wound up getting ripped off.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, that whole electrical back scene is very iconic and extremely effective to that scene. And then another thing to that scene that makes it even more powerful, so powerful that it got people so worked up that they were this is before they had you know, codes for films, you know,
I know where you're going, but wow,
all of that stuff. He, you know, the main character, you know, Frankenstein, the guy, the scientist, says, you know, now I know what it feels like to be God.
Yes.
That was an extremely controversial thing to say. That just got a lot of people to ban the movie in certain states, and you know, there were revisions that had to be done in order for the movie to be able to be shown in certain places of the United States. So it was a very powerful movie at that time. You know, I mean, we look at it now and compared to everything that we see nowadays, it's like we look at it and we go, that's nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
during that time, it was huge.
This predates,
very powerful.
This predates way before John Lennon or the Beatles ever existed. But you know, like that kind of reminds you when John Lennon goes on TV
got in trouble,
and he's like, "I do not believe in God." Oh my God! I mean.
Well, he got in trouble back in the 60s, you know, when they were extremely powerful, when he was comparing the popularity of the Beatles
and God,
to the popularity of, I think it was Jesus.
Jesus Christ,
but he got in major trouble for that way back in the 60s.
But it's kind of interesting you picked up on that, because that's something else I read, and it kind of stood out to me, because it partly because of this film and that line that they started censoring films. And I was reading that they went back because of the way people reacted to that line, and they actually took it out of the film for several years. And then when it was originally released on DVD for the first time in 1999, they went ahead and they released it as it originally was, with that line. So it's kind of interesting that over a course of, you know, all these years that eventually they put it back into the film.
Well, there's another thing that happened that a lot of people don't know about is the scene where he plays with that young girl.
Yeah.
And then he winds up, they run out of flowers, and so he throws the little girl in the lake.
Yeah.
And doesn't know that she doesn't know how to swim, and then she winds up drowning, and he winds up killing her by doing that. And so that was another thing that people had, a serious problem with back in those days. So they actually cut that scene. And I was reading that usually when that happens in a movie, those scenes get lost.
Yeah.
They're and they never, they're lost to the production forever. But someone, I think if I read correctly, I think it was back in, say, like the mid '60s, found it, and they reinfused it back into the movie.
Yeah, I was reading the same thing.
Many decades
before that
the movie went on without that scene.
And see,
because they just determined that was something that needed to be censored.
See, and it's amazing that such a scene would be so controversial, in the sense that the movie, I guess, it seems so real to people when they're seeing it for the first time. You forget it's a movie, maybe. You forget it's supposed to be a monster. Monster's not maybe got the morality of a human being, and you got to kind of tell yourself, people, it's just a movie. But it was so real, I guess, that scene, that people took such offense to it. And we're going to get into this, when we do like a couple more episodes from now. Gar and I decided, while we're talking about Frankenstein, how cool it would be to talk about another Frankenstein-related film in a future episode, Young Frankenstein. And they kind of take on this scene when they made Young Frankenstein, so they would not get that kind of reaction. We'll talk about that in the future episode, but it's kind of interesting that another film was made down the line, and because of the way people reacted to the original film, we better kind of do that differently. Yeah.
Well, Mel Brooks,
Yeah, and like
he's got that look in his eye that he's up to something funny.
And see, that's what I love about that film is we'll get into more in a future episode. But I love the fact that he took a classic like Frankenstein and kind of put his comedic genius bent on it.
Yeah, but the original Frankenstein is so different from the book.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. Now, before we get to that, I would like to also mention that as far as Boris Karloff, he would reprise the role of Frankenstein in the following films: The Bride of Frankenstein, which originally came out in 1935, and The Son of Frankenstein, which was 1939. And just a little more trivia here on him. In 1966, it said Boris Karloff also voiced, which I did not know this till I read this, he also voiced the Grinch in How the Grinch Stole Christmas in the original animated version from 1966 again. It was an animated television special of Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which he won him a Grammy Award. And also for his contribution to film and television. Karloff was awarded 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, not 1 but 2. I mean that tells you all you need to know about this guy. 2 iconic characters. Not just Frankenstein, but eventually the Grinch.
Well, there was also back during the same time period that he did the Grinch that I'm not sure if it's his actual voice, but it sure sounds like him. Yeah, like I said, I know the song, the Monster Mash. It's a graveyard smash.
It very well might have, because I read that because of his role in the Grinch, he won a Grammy Award. It didn't say what, but that's probably why.
I got a feeling that's what it is, because that song was super popular back in the 1960s. It's the iconic voice. The second you hear Boris Karloff speak, you know who it is.
And see, what's cool about that is Boris Karloff is, like I said, he's known as Frankenstein, a guy for doing these great horror films. And then the Grinch is nothing like having anything to do with horror. A Christmas holiday movie that kids and people love for many, many years, and they made many remakes of it. But like you said, so he's known as an actor, and then he gets to play the part of the Grinch and sing this classic song. He's not even really known as a singer. As an entertainer, how cool is it to be able to break out into not just what you're known for your acting, but to be able to perform like a classic song like that. You win a Grammy for it. And then I was also reading, he was so popular at this time. I'm going to post this on our page later. But just kind of doing research on Frankenstein and Boris Karloff, I came across, he was in a TV coffee commercial, if you can believe that.
I did not know that.
Yeah. I mean, so many cool things I found out about this guy. So there's, again, we were kind of guilty of seeing these classic films. You think, that's Frankenstein. There's obviously much more to Boris Karloff than just Frankenstein. Even I was surprised to find out he played the Grinch. I mean, because it's an animation thing, and I didn't read the credits back in the day, but it was like, wow, okay, multi-talented,
Well, yeah, and a very comfortable long career for him.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you would look back, you would look at how does somebody just kind of do it like a one-trick pony, but last that long?
Yeah, eventually people usually get tired of it.
He had such a long success, but it never felt or seemed like he overdid it.
Yeah, and here's the thing with that.
He was running the character into the ground.
Yeah, and here's the thing with that. Like, because of that, he's the original. And there have been plenty of other people to play this role since he's passed on. But the thing is, all those other Frankensteins are compared to him because he is the original.
Yes.
Here's another interesting thing I was reading. A New York Times critic said that Frankenstein created so much excitement among the people in the audience, I guess this was in a movie theater, and that many people in the audience laughed to mask the true feeling of how terrified they really were. Kind of nervous laughter. And that the Dracula movie was tame next to this,
I would venture to guess that's a kind of a normal human reaction is to laugh.
Yeah.
But it's called a nervous laughter.
Or even people that they don't maybe want to see that you think you got put on this cool, kind of ego, and you can't let people see that you're scared.
So I think it's a normal human reaction to do something like that, and it's kind of unique that writer that did the review, picked up on that because I mean we've always. I think we've always heard the term nervous laughter.
Yeah, and that's what that is. Yeah, and I even find myself in movies like, crying. What's going on? Oh, I got something in my eye, But and here's some interesting trivia I found out. Now, talking about the what filmmaking was like at the time and special effects, or even like you were talking about the lightning scene with the machine and all that. That was like high-tech special effects for that time in 1931. But I was reading also that they placed a microphone in the coffin used in the funeral scene to amplify the sound of the dirt hitting the lid of the coffin.
That's, I mean, when you think about the, 1931.
Yeah. What filmmaking was.
Advanced technology at that time.
Very
forward thinking by the people behind doing that scene.
Yeah.
Of actually, sometimes the things that make things great are the smallest details.
Yeah, because I was reading too when they were
those kind of examples.
Because I was reading too, like again, these were one of the first talking pictures, and so like when they were making these films, I mean, like just the slightest little pin drop you would hear, or just like there wasn't a lot of dialogue in these films because they were early films, just learning how to do all this. For example, the actors that would say their lines. I mean, in a lot of these scenes, the actors just talking to this screen as they're doing this. Nobody's really in the room. They're not talking to anybody else. but the people in the movie audience, if you know what I mean. And
well, even for me, you know, when I was a kid back in the '60s, you know, when you watched those movies and you would hear it, you would hear the snap, crackle, pop kind of stuff that was, you know, part of the audio of the movie. And, you know, to be honest with you, those long pauses that you know became part of that, where all you heard was the snap, crackle, and pop. It just added its flavor to that whole scene, where if you filled it up with dialogue and everything, the scene wouldn't be as effective. So sometimes it's just you know, things that are incidental that even make it, you know, creepier and better.
And the younger you are,
that quality of the audio with the snap, crackle, pop, and those long durations of
no dialogue,
no dialogue and stuff like that. It really added to it. But it was actually incidental. It wasn't created. It wasn't thought out. It just was part of the natural
progression of the film.
Yes.
And it's interesting, like you said, it wasn't something they set out. It just kind of had that natural effect, which is a beautiful part of what I love about it. And, you know, like the younger you are, like a young kid that's seen this for the first time, they're gonna, you know, they're gonna be scared to death because it seems so real. And getting back to what you were saying at the top of this, when we started our conversation today, you know, you got to consider this was based on a book, and if you look at the character in the book is nothing like the character in the movie. There's lots of reason for that, because when you're making a movie is visual, where, you know, even you know, today if you read a book, there's pictures and you can see illustrations and stuff in a book, but it's not the same as seeing it on the screen. And for that reason alone, I was reading, this is really kind of going to prove that point. The monster makeup design was by this guy, Jack P. Pierce. Jack Pierce was a legendary monster maker. He made the monsters for, you know, he had like a lab. He created these monsters. So anyways, he worked in the 1930s and 1940s at Universal Studios during its classic horror period that we're talking about. And his copyright is still copyrighted to Universal until the year 2026. When I was reading about this guy, so the Frankenstein in this movie from 1931 looks nothing like Frankenstein in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This Jack Pierce, he designed this Frankenstein. He came up with the design of, and it says the character Frankenstein does not physically look like the character in Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein, which was published in Paris, France in 1821. It was makeup artist Jack Pierce who came up with innovations such as the monster's flat head, the bolts in the neck, the droopy eyelids, and the poorly fitted suit. So if you were to read the original novel, Frankenstein in that book has none of these characteristics. But a makeup artist that was working on the film, he came up with all those innovations. And it's funny that Frankenstein starts out as a novel, you know, years before the film in the 1800s. And by the time
100 years before the film.
And then this guy, who's many people say, oh, he's just a makeup artist. But back in these days when these films were being made, a makeup artist had a big role, as we can tell in these films. I mean, he totally transformed what the character was just in the book. I mean,
absolutely.
If this guy had not been involved in film, Frankenstein might look very differently. Who knows?
Well, you know, even the name. There's two things about it. Number one, in the book, the scientist was Victor Frankenstein. In the movie, it's Henry Frankenstein. So even, you know, a small detail like that, which is really not that big of a deal, but it's just like, for some reason, people figured that Henry was a better choice for the name, you know, of the scientist, you know, which I don't really see the difference. But I think the biggest thing that stands out is everyone, you know, when you hear the word, the name Frankenstein, you don't associate it to the scientist.
The monster.
Name to the monster, and the monster was never really referred to as Frankenstein. It was always monster, you know, and all these other horrible references, that you would say to somebody if you were trying to insult them. Those would be the references that they would use to referring to the monster. But over all of the years, I mean, even to this day, people still refer the name Frankenstein, and immediately
to the monster.
That name goes to the monster.
And what's interesting about that too is that is so true what you said. But then years later, like when they would, we did an episode on the Addams Family, but other kind of TV fright family would be the Munsters, and of course. Anybody looks at Herman Munster, you don't have to be a genius. Herman Munster is based on, Frankenstein. But Herman Munster, unlike Frankenstein, is supposed to be kind of a stupider, dumbed down, friendly kind of monster. But again, it's based on Frankenstein.
Well, the guy that played Herman Munster,
Fred Gwynne.
I just have such a soft spot for him as an actor. Because when I was a kid, never cared for his character. This is just how it struck me.
Okay,
And I would hate to have somebody that feels differently to be offended. By what I'm saying, because that's not what I mean. But he was bringing comedy to that character, and I just never really bought it. And as a kid, it's just that first impression. But he went on to do such powerful characters in other stuff that I mean, he's another one of those guys like Boris Karloff that's had a very, very long, successful career. Off of many, many different characters. You know what I mean? He just etched out a very, very successful career, and you don't do that unless you're very talented.
And here's the thing: you got to have respect for an actor like Fred Gwynne. When you read stuff up on him, you find out even though The Munsters was only on TV for 3 seasons, I mean, it's classic. We see it constantly in reruns, and I'm bringing it up too because I'd read the poor guy that during those 3 seasons he had awful back pain because he'd have to be on the set for many hours filming this stuff, not just in the makeup, but those boots and stuff you wear and the big suits weighed a ton. I mean, and so much that it caused him awful back pain for years and years. But that's, I guess, one of the that's the price you pay, or whatever for doing stuff like that. But I mean, even though like The Munsters were only 3 seasons on TV, it's a classic now. It's one of those things people, like every Halloween they have a Munsters marathon or something like that. Or
absolutely, and well deserved. Just because I'm voicing how I feel, kudos, because yes. If something was as bad as how I'm voicing, how I felt about it, you don't have that kind of success for that kind of duration with a TV show that was only on for 3 seasons. It's a major statement about the success of that show.
And of course,
that can't be argued with.
And of course, they give him, the name Herman Munster because we're not supposed to think it's Frankenstein, but we know that's what it's based on. And then, of course, in The Munsters, Frankenstein is supposedly married to Count Dracula's daughter. What did you think of how they kind of create this TV family of monsters and they kind of base them on these historical characters? I mean, it was kind of even Dracula, couldn't help but love his dumb, stupid son-in-law.
My favorite Fred Gwynn character was the character that he did in Pet Sematary.
Yeah, oh yeah. That's a legendary.
Original Pet Sematary.
Yeah, that's a legendary.
And I don't know if it was written or if it was just something that was said that, hey, let's use that.
Yeah.
You know, because that happens every once in a while. But his famous line from that movie is, "Sometimes dead is better."
Yeah, you know, and Gar, it's funny that you bring up that line because I got this idea in my head a few weeks ago when I was doing research for Frankenstein, coming up with all this stuff to talk about, and I came across the American Film Institute's page, and they got a list of like 100 like classic films, and one of these lists they have is like the most memorable movie lines, and you'd be amazed. I mean, I want to do an episode just on these most memorable lines because you'd be amazed how many of these you probably.
Sounds like a beautiful one.
Yeah, and I'm bringing this up now because what I'm about ready to tell you. So okay, this is the line in the movie. Another one besides the one you said about I know what it's like to be God. This is probably one of the most memorable lines in Frankenstein. It's alive! It's alive! That was voted the number 49 movie quote by, again, the American Film Institute of America in 2005. And there's so many of these. I mean, we could go down the list, which we will in the future, but just to give you an idea, like, you know, E.T. phone home. My mama said life is like a box of chocolates. We all know that's from Forrest Gump, but there are so many of these lines that just, like even this, it's alive, it's alive. You know that's from Frankenstein, you know, if you've seen the film.
Oh, there's got to be some from Young Frankenstein, too.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. And, and I was reading the most difficult part was casting the part of the monster. The film's director, James Whale, spotted Boris Karloff, of all places, in the Universal Commissary and offered him a screen test for the title role. Karloff later joked he was offended that James Whale saw him as such an ugly character on a day when he was wearing his best suit. So again, Karloff kind of has a great sense of humor there, you know? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's I can definitely understand, you know, the disappointment in what he's saying.
Yeah. And
you could be, you know, as well best dressed as you want. You're still going to be ugly.
Yeah, and you know, yeah. In fact, maybe even uglier than what you really are under the makeup.
I also read that originally they were heavily considering Boris Karloff playing the monster. And Boris Karloff, the reason why that wound up going south or fizzled was because, number one, Boris Karloff, was unenthusiastic about doing the character, and the person that was in charge of makeup had a completely different viewpoint than the gentleman that actually wound up doing the makeup for Frankenstein. They wound up replacing him, but the original makeup artist had a very different viewpoint about how they were going to do the monster and everything like that, and it just wasn't working, and so the actual studio fired both Bela Lugosi and the original makeup artist or the original director of the, you know, so they fired both of them and then replaced both of them, and then what wound up being made became the iconic version that we still love today, 90 years later.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. 10 more years, going to be 100 years old. How amazing is that? But to kind of go along with what you were just talking about, I was reading this director John Whale, who's the guy who ended up directing the film. He also changed the Frankenstein character from the violent killing machine that it was previously known as to the more caring, sensitive, lost soul that Frankenstein was in the 1931 film that premiered 90 years ago. Now, again, like you're saying, I guess when they decided to make the film, they kind of realized, well, if we want people to like this movie, you can't really have Frankenstein be all that violent. People aren't going to like the character. So they had to kind of soften him up, and they kind of make you understand it's Frankenstein's kind of a fragile character. He's sensitive. He's not really kind of not understood. He's the monster part of it is really kind of they create this thing. They don't really know what it's going to be when it comes to life, and it comes to life, and like any monster, just kind of coming to life. It doesn't really have anything to draw from. It's just kind of coming into the world, and it's kind of just
like a brand new born baby.
Yeah, just kind of reacting, to things, and it's kind of interesting that that was their intention, to have kind of a less violent monster, and you could understand why. Okay, well, it's going to be on the screen. It got to make it somewhat likable, besides trying to scare the hell out of people. But and then when you have that scene at the lake where the little girl dies, he does not come across as so caring and sensitive in that one scene.
Well, I watched the movie.
Yeah.
To kind of just nostalgically
to prep for this,
prepare for this, that we're doing. And one of the things that after having seen it for gosh knows how many years, how many decades, I really haven't seen, so to watch it again after all these years. What I walked away from it, especially the ending, towards the ending of the movie, is it's kind of a social statement on how if you can take any one person, and if you've got a mob coming for you, with a bunch of torches and spiked, farm hand tools and stuff like that. If you got a mob chasing you and coming after you like that, it'll turn anyone into a murderous maniac.
Oh yeah, and I'm willing to bet back in 1931 when this film was originally made and released that they didn't have movie screenings like they did where they premiere the film and you'd go see it, and people would kind of react to it, or even before it was released in the theaters. And it's kind of interesting when you talk about the line where he talks about, I know what it's like to be God. Well, you got to think, a mad scientist, somebody that's kind of creating something like this, he's got that ego that, look at all this power I have. I mean, that's kind of a natural kind of, if you're in that scenario, that's kind of the ego you'd have to have. And yet at the same time, like I said, the people that were making this film, they probably didn't think that people would have such a reaction to that line in the film about he knows what it's like to be God, or the scene at the lake. They probably thought, people are just going to see it's a monster and he's doing what monsters do. But they probably had no idea that scene in the movie is going to get such a reaction. And then when it does, it's like, wow, kind of, how did we not see that?
Well, it's because they were blazing a trail.
And
when you're blazing a trail, sometimes you're going to, let's find out what the, reaction to this is. It's basically live testing. That used to go on back in those days when they were making movies and stuff like that. It was a lot of the product that they were putting out were live tests.
Oh yeah, I mean these films, especially, like I said, this is these horror films, especially in 1931, it put Universal Studios like on an upward trajectory. Like you said, they were probably very near bankruptcy at the time, and they kind of they kind of, this was their specialty. I mean, Universal, before anybody really got into the horror thing, and then every other studio afterwards saw the success they had and started wanting to kind of get into that horror thing. And a lot of them got into it. I mean, it's funny because these original horror films by Universal, to me, they're still my favorite ones. They're still the ones that originated this kind of genre of film. And you got ones that stand out, like, you have the Halloween, you have a Nightmare on Elm Street, but there are very few of those, in between,
they are the original trailblazers, and of course, when you're the actual one that blazed the trail, usually you're the one that basically set the standard for everyone else that follows. And everyone else that follows is trying to attempt to make something that's as competitive to that original one as possible. But it's always the originator that gets the most attention. And that goes in many different areas, not just in movie making. That also goes in even bands and music and things. It's always the original that sets the standard for everyone else that follows in that genre, because there's a lot of times that genres never existed until an originator starts thinking about that, and then all of a sudden it takes hold, and that originator actually created that new path.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me.
It works in music, it works in movies, but it's always the originator that gets the most, because they set the standard.
That's it. Set the standard. You're right about. It kind of reminds me when we people also want to go check out our episode 9 we just posted, which was our discussion on the 50th anniversary of Alice Cooper's Love It to Death, and I bring that up because not only is it a great episode, people want to check it out, but Alice Cooper kind of has this horror thing. He puts on the makeup. He's kind of known for his horror thing and his great kind of rock and roll live stage show. But we were talking about this, that if you go back and you listen to those first 2 Alice albums, you gave it the best description. Almost like they were almost doing on their first 2 albums like psychedelic type of music. And by the time they get to the 3rd album, Love It to Death, that is where the Alice Cooper band finally finds its sound, and before that they were kind of just getting stuff on tape. They didn't really know what they were doing, but by the time they get to the 3rd album, they found what they were all about.
Well, and there was a time where that kind of ended, where bands would be cultivated by record companies. They would be given a second chance and a third chance. You see what I mean?
Yes.
Now there is, I don't know exactly when, but there is a time period. I think it started in the early 90s.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
That no longer would record companies cultivate up and coming bands. If you didn't hit major success or at least a base hit with your first release, then you're thrown into the scrap heap.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of hugely iconic, hugely successful bands that if they would have risen in any time period after their time period, they would have been thrown into the scrap heap too.
Oh yeah.
And so it's kind of just a pivotal point where nowadays you have to be poised and ready and have that kind of powerful product right from the get-go.
Yeah.
But then again, the same thing used to happen with movies. There would always be the studios that would work with their actors and cultivate the talent. Where nowadays that cultivation doesn't exist either. You're not given second chances and third chances. Here's your chance. Okay, sink or swim.
Yeah,
Throw them
basically.
in the deep end, and let's see if they'll sink or swim.
If it's a hit, we love you. If not, we don't want to know you, basically. But yeah,
exactly.
And
so it's what can you do about it? Because there's really, it's just a change that's happened naturally. But I can see parallels in both in all aspects of art, and I think there's a lot of people that look at movies and don't really look at it as art.
Yeah.
But I think the people that really understand art, what most artists are trying to do is trying to get people to stop and to think and to come up with their own idea as to what the artist is saying about whatever they're putting out, whether it be a painting, whether it be a song, whether it be movies, whether it be a performance. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it's another thing we've talked about in the past, like going back, for example, 1931 when this film was made. All they were thinking about was making a movie. They didn't have the concept like they do now when they make a movie of we're going to merchandise the hell out of this thing. I mean, it's kind of funny because talking about how something like Frankenstein has an effect on pop culture, okay, all these years later, 90 years later, I mean, it's continued to since the film was original. For example, every Halloween, okay, we start seeing images, and even you go online, you can see even images of Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman and all these classic horror things around Halloween time. And have you ever noticed all these images are always like in black and white, because that's kind of a throwback to that era. And when you think of these creatures, oftentimes in Halloween. And then I was also looking to see, okay, do they have any like Frankenstein T-shirts or Dracula T-shirts? Yeah, you can go online. There's a ton of stuff you can find. But I noticed, for example, the T-shirts are always like either in black or white. Why is that, do you think? Well, because when people think of horror, black kind of is that color. White kind of because many of these classic films were black and white. But it's kind of funny that when you see a poster, a picture, like even some of these movie posters you see from back in the day, if you go online, you can find plenty of like posters of the Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula, and there are these classic photos that are worth a ton if you can get your hands on them. But it's funny, if you look, they're all colored like in black and white, and that's just how they market this stuff, and people still are into buying this stuff. I mean, you see somebody like in a Frankenstein T-shirt, and you go, oh, he must be a Frankenstein fan. He must be a horror fan or something. You just kind of draw conclusions about people when you see them in certain attire.
Well, I remember as a kid, I was always in anticipation of
dressing up for Halloween.
Watching Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
Oh yeah, classic. Yeah.
I would always, there was a run for quite a few years when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That every Halloween at around 6 p.m., they would show that movie, and then I would watch, because it was a really funny movie.
Yeah.
And, just kind of set the tone where it's, not dark, not scary, not, the comedy element to it and everything like that. And then getting dressed in my costume and going out for Halloween.
Yeah.
And in the larger metropolitan cities, the children, they get to enjoy, what has become Halloween now, where parents can let their kids go out and trick or treat safely and stuff like that. But when I was a kid, way back in the 60s, your parents, you'd leave the house at around 7, when it's getting dark, around 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And here I am, and I'm in elementary school. I'm that young. I'm in elementary school, and my parents are letting my sister and I go out from house to house to strangers' houses for literally hours, going from house to house to collect candies with no parent supervision at night.
Amazing, yeah.
And, to think about that now, because you just can't do that. I'm sure there were neighbors that were just as unsavory back in those days. But I never really had any episodes where my safety was.
Well, the world was a much different place back then, Yeah.
It had its dangers. There were unsavory people back then too.
And there always will be, but yeah.
But parents just let their kids go out, for Halloween, and that was the norm back then. Here you are as an elementary school kid going door to door with no parent supervision and walking through the whole neighborhood at night. And it's just something that just cannot be done nowadays. And I feel really bad for the kids now, because they don't get to experience, because man, as a kid, I can't, Christmas and Halloween, baby.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those were two parts of the year that were in high anticipation for me as a kid. Of course, everybody understands about Christmas. The high anticipation is because of all the presents. Stuff. But the high anticipation of the Halloween thing was the candy and the going out and dressing up as all of this stuff and going from door to door.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was something that I got to experience that meant so much to me. And then once I got too old, that anticipation became the horror movies and just got transferred all the way over to that because, now you're older, you're not going to be, you're too old to go trick-or-treating. But I loved Halloween so much.
Yeah.
All of that love for Halloween got transferred over to the horror movies, and that's, I think that has a lot to do with why I was so gravitated and I watched so much horror stuff through all the years.
Yeah.
And it all really goes back to my childhood.
Yeah,
and what I got to enjoy.
Oh yeah, and it's kind of interesting. You're saying 90 years of Frankenstein and Dracula, and so that's like 9 generations of people that have lived through these films. And so you just think about that. I mean, because there are some things in life where like one generation may be into, but not the others. And it's kind of people just have a love for this horror stuff. And I think, like you're saying, Dracula and Frankenstein specifically. They're like the two originators of it. Really kind of started this whole horror thing, and that's why for years and years, Universal was the trailblazer in this horror genre. As you say, they created all these great monsters and stuff, and then that's why all these other movie companies they could maybe do their own take on Frankenstein and Dracula, but that's why I have a lot of respect for films like you got the Halloweens, you got the Psychos, you got the Freddy Kruegers. These are original characters somebody else created. It's a new kind of thing, continuing on that horror theme, and that's why I have just as much respect for that. Because like you're kind of saying, you look at a movie like Psycho, look at Norman Bates. Now, if you were to see that guy on the street, you'd think he was perfectly normal, but then you watch that movie, you see what the guy is into, and you're like, he's kind of a freak,
Oh God, I love that movie.
And then you're also telling me The Birds is another one of your favorite films, and
both of those movies. I cannot say enough.
I'll just say
I absolutely love both of those movies, and a lot of people don't know that the woman that gets murdered in Psycho is Jamie Lee Curtis's mom.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to do an episode on both of those because just to mention briefly The Birds. What I love about that film is, again, who would initially, just on the concept of thinking that you could ever be scared to death of like a pigeon, but what Alfred Hitchcock did in that movie, I mean, people were terrified of birds for years. I know people that got phobias from seeing that movie of birds. It's amazing what you can do with a film like that.
Well, I think it kind of touches onto how a person reacts to a mob.
Yeah.
Because in Frankenstein, my statement earlier, if you take any person, and you have a mob coming after him, a murderous mob, that is completely exerting hatred for you, that alone would take any person and turn them into a murderous maniac. Because when you have a mob, and what is the number one human characteristic when your life is being threatened?
Fear and
preserving your life.
Yeah.
And if you got people coming after you like that, you're going to still try to preserve your life because that mob is coming to kill you. And that's the same thing about birds. You take a bird, a single bird, and that's a completely non-threatening entity, right?
Oh yeah. Well,
but now you take thousands and thousands and thousands of birds, and immediately that can be disconcerting. It can be intimidating.
Oh yeah. And you look at a couple of things like, okay, what's a bird you would say that a lot of people kind of naturally fear? You automatically think maybe of a crow, a vulture, but like not a bunch of pigeons. But it goes back to what you're saying. See the thing too about pigeons, a bird, or just really any animal. An animal has like killer instinct. Animals have natural instinct. Like you and I, we might know how like a human being might react, but you really don't know how animals going to react to something you do. And there's that fear of like, is that bird going to come over here and peck me to death? Or,
Well, I think even a bird's reaction is going to be self-preservation.
Of course, yeah.
Like
anything,
any living entity. But it's just it's so powerful that Alfred Hitchcock chose something as unintimidating as a bird and can turn that into one of the scariest elements that you can utilize in a movie.
Yeah, well,
that's just massive vision, massive creative vision, and that's the ultimate goal of any artist.
Oh yeah, I mean, you take you take a film, even like, here's the thing I love about film, like you could have a film about like the ugly alien monstrous alien coming down, and everybody's going to be terrified of it. Or you take a film like what Steven Spielberg did with E.T., make the lovable alien that everybody's going to love to death, and then you get a totally different kind of reaction from the audience,
Yes. Yeah. Everybody used to love E.T.
You and my grandma. E.T. phone home. That's the classic line again.
Yes.
I really had fun doing this today, Gar, and so just to let people know, next up, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be posting the episode we did on our favorite TV show themes. And then a couple of weeks when Gar and I do this again, we're going to do an episode on the Adam West Batman TV show. Me and Gar were just huge fans of that. In fact, he even joked about, before in a past episode, when he was a kid, that if, he didn't mind being punched, but one thing he hated was when his parents tell him, you cannot watch Batman or something like that.
Well, also I got to congratulate you. I mean, you're the quality of subjects that you're interviewing is really starting to become astounding. Which makes it it's.
Well, when we do these things,
quite a compliment that you're interviewing me when you're interviewing people like Carmine Appice and a lot of these other very famous people. It's very humbling. That you're doing these interviews with me. very, very humbling, and I just because of the fact that you're including me in this is
well, I'll tell you, Gar. I want people to know.
Very appreciative.
I appreciate the kind words you just said, but I'll tell you, there's a couple of reasons for that. Because I've been following you for a number of years, and you've got your great, huge talent fan base that you got going for you. And here's the thing: I know, like first interview I ever did with you. This guy's got something to say. I'm talking about Gar Borras here. And here's a funny thing, Gar, but we're going to eventually get to it, but all these interviews that you and I have done over the course of time that we've known each other, I've kind of thought, okay, it'd be obvious to interview him about the band he's in, and we've done that. It'd be obvious to talk to him about being a Guns N' Roses fan. And we haven't done that yet, only because it's the obvious thing. Now, all these other things we talked about, I found out you're a big Alice Cooper fan, a big Black Sabbath fan. You're a fan of all this stuff that I'm a fan of. And so we got a lot in common to talk about. And it's kind of, even just doing the episode today, it's kind of funny that you and I, we don't really prep to say, except for, before the show, say, okay, this is what we're going to talk about. And you and I do an equal amount of research. And then when we do the show like we did today, I'm kind of it just amazes me, the stuff that you researched, that you found a lot of the same stuff I did to mention. That tells me, okay, we're kind of on the same wavelength, and it's also interesting to interview you because you're a little bit older, so we have different perspectives, even though a lot of the stuff we're kind of into the same type of stuff.
Kindred spirits.
Yeah, in fact, I often in the description when I post these episodes we do, I'll put Gar Borras could give lessons in rock and roll, or pretty much anything you talk about, because that's the fun thing about when we decided to launch Gar Borras' Time Machine. I'd had so much fun talking about music over the course of our friendship, but I thought, there's got to be more to this guy than just music. I mean, there's more to me. I like all these classic films and TV shows, so that's what's made this so fun. Every time we do this, we don't really know what we're going to talk about until we, decide what we're going to talk about.
Well, congratulations on your success, and I'm just very appreciative to be part of this.
Well, Gar, like I said, you're a big part of it too, because it is called Gar Borras' Time Machine, so you're a huge part of why people tune into this. But I don't think it'd be the same thing, obviously, if I did with anybody else. Just like anytime you have a change in your band members. Everybody kind of brings something to the table, so it's all about teamwork. I think we got that magic chemistry, it seems.
Absolutely. I thoroughly enjoy doing this.
Okay, take care, my friend. And so, we'll do this again in about 2 weeks, and then I know you have another show coming up, so you getting ready for that? In fact, you have two shows coming up, right? The same weekend?
I think our next show is in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona, at a place called Casino, Arizona.
Yeah.
And I think this is the first time that we've really done back-to-back shows at the same venue. So we're gonna do 2 Halloween shows, one on Friday and one on Saturday night. Just before Halloween, and we're really looking forward to that. I got a feeling there's going to be a lot of people that are going to show up dressed like their favorite Guns N' Roses member, and 90% of the time it's one of the original 5. Steve, coming as a Steven Adler or an Izzy.
Oh, that's cool.
But I'm sure there'll be people dressed up like Axl and people dressed up like Slash, and it just seems to.
See, right there.
I got a big anticipation for that show. Right
there, you're getting into your Halloween mode. So that was great that we're doing this, and then final thing I'll say for the day is. As we mentioned during the episode, so after we do our Batman episode, we are going to do an episode. This was Gar's suggestion. I think it's a great one after doing Frankenstein. He said, why don't we do an episode on Young Frankenstein? Because again, I'm saying we should do something for Halloween kind of theme. And he says, why don't we do Young Frankenstein? And I think that's a great choice, Gar, because, which we'll get more into it when we do it, but I love the fact that, Mel Brooks took this classic Frankenstein and he put his comedic bent on it, you know, and I always love to laugh, you know, so you get a great horror thing with laughter, and you can never beat, you know, sometimes I say laughter is the best medicine.
Oh, I love Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one.
So many quotes just from that movie alone.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I would do backflips to do one of those on that movie.
Well, we're going to, like, as soon, don't forget, you suggested, so right after we do the Batman episode, I think that's what we're going to do.
Totally looking forward to it.
Take care, my friend. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.